Hello everyone! Today we're going to be talking about glide reflections, and first let's just talk about the basic idea. Alright, the idea here behind a glide reflection is that we're taking a translation and combining it with a reflection. So one example that you might see in the real world is footprints. So here are some perfectly drawn footprints, and on these we'd have the axis of reflection here, and what's going on is this footprint here that we've bolded is translated over and then reflected down to get this next one here. And similarly, this second one is translated over and reflected up to get this one here. All right. To do a glide reflection, we need a couple of things. One thing that we need is the vector of translation. And then the second thing we need is the axis of reflection. And one thing that we want to note here is that these have to be parallel. So something like this, vector axis is okay. Something like this, vector axis is not okay because these are not parallel. So we're going to work with stuff like this. All right. Our first example. Find the image of the triangle under a glide reflection with axis L and vector. Well, we're not told what vector we want to use. We've got to determine if we want to use V or if we want to use W. And if we're following the rule about vector being parallel to the axis, that's immediately going to rule out V because it's not parallel to this axis L. So we're going to be using the vector W. Okay, now let's go ahead and do this here. We're going to slide along this vector and then reflect over. So this vector takes any point and moves it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to the right. All right, so let's start with this top point of the triangle here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that puts us intermediately here. And then we're going to reflect down. So it was 4 above. Now it's going to be 4 below that axis. Now let's deal with this left-hand point. So it was 2 left and 1 down from the other point. So 2 left and 1 down puts us here. And we reflect down. It was 3 above. Now it'll be 3 below. And this bottom point, well, it was 3 below that first point we did. So we can just use that 3 below. And it was 1 above the axis. When we reflect, it'll be 1 below the axis. And we fill in the sides of our triangle. And there is our glide reflected triangle. All right, let's go ahead and do one more example. Here we've got 2 point image pairs, A and A prime, B and B prime, and we want to find several things. We want to find the axis of reflection, the vector of translation, and then the image of the whole triangle. All right, so here is our point A, and we know where it ends up. Here is our point B, and we know where it ends up. There's a couple of ways we can figure this out. So one thing that we're going to use is the fact that the vector and the axis are parallel. So we can sort of see, well, to be reflected this way, right, it seems like maybe A had to come over here and then get reflected up. And that would work with B as well. B could come over here and get reflected up. But a more precise way to find it is that the axis of reflection goes through the midpoint of the segments connecting A to A prime and B to B prime. Okay, so let's draw very lightly the segment from A to A prime and from B to B prime, and it looks like the midpoint is about here for B and about here for A. So it seems like the axis of reflection goes along this here. So here is our axis. Okay, so we found our axis of reflection, and now we want to find our vector of translation. Well, we see, right, that A starts off 2 below that axis, and it ends up 2 above that axis. And remember, this vector has to be parallel to the axis. So we had to slide right, and for A to end up reflecting to A prime, we have to slide right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's that intermediate point. So here is our vector of translation. And keep in mind, we could have drawn that anywhere. We could have drawn it down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that would have been just fine. You can draw your vector of translation anywhere. It just has to be the right length and the right direction. All right, and last thing we want to do, find the image of the whole triangle under this glide reflection. Well, we know where A and B went. Now we just have to do this other point down here, and it gets slid 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it was 4 below, and so now it's going to be 4 above, and that matches up. It was 2 below A, now it's 2 above A, and we fill in our triangle, and there we go. That will be it for today.